Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. This is the last talk I'll be giving here for a few months as we enter the Rains retreat at the end of July. So tonight I thought I'd give a talk on meditation, perhaps giving you some encouragement to continue to practice diligently over the next 3 months, even though the Sangha won't be here on a Friday night. One of the reflections that came up just from talking to someone before I came in this evening is to remember that it takes courage to challenge our old habit patterns. And meditation is, if nothing else, a challenge to our old habit patterns, our mental habit patterns. It takes courage to be willing to look into our mind and see what's there, to see what it contains, to pay closer attention to how we react to life's situations. And sometimes we might feel that practicing meditation cuts us off from our friends or our family because we're turning inwards. Maybe we're becoming too selfish by looking in rather than always looking out. And sometimes our friends can perhaps challenge us with that kind of criticism. We're no fun anymore because we don't do what everyone else is doing. And particularly if we've been involved in using drugs and alcohol as a way of relaxing or of feeling more pleasure than we've been able to feel naturally. If using drugs and alcohol is one of the ways we connect with our friends, then it certainly can take courage to step outside those old habit patterns. It's not only that we might be meeting with disapproval from our friends, but there's a fear in our own mind that we're not going to be able to find the kind of refuge or the kind of enjoyment that we found in drugs and alcohol. And especially when we first start to meditate, there can be a time when meditation isn't pleasant, it's not peaceful, and it doesn't provide us with the same kind of high that we were getting from our drugs and alcohol. And so it really does take courage to persist through those times and to resist the pull back to using drugs and alcohol as a way of getting out of it, feeling perhaps more open to people. One of the things that I can guarantee from my own experience and my own practice of meditation is that whatever you get out of drugs, you can also get out of meditation. And not just the pleasant experiences and the openness to other people, but also the tremendous confidence that it brings that within our own mind we have the ability to find refuge, to find peace, to come to a place where we feel whole just on our own. It took me years to come to that point, but because I've experienced that myself, coming very much from the same place of wanting to connect with others, wanting to have access to pleasure that wasn't too hard, being in the place of wanting to move outside the narrow confines of my own conditioning, having come from that place myself and having found what I was looking for through meditation, I would really encourage you, if you're having doubts, to stick in there, to not give up, and to keep on putting in the effort to cultivate the path. One of the wonderful benefits of meditation practice is that it gives us the inner strength to open to others much more on their own terms, because we don't want anything from them. We don't need them in the same way as we did previously, because we have our own inner refuge, our own inner strength. And if people are different, if they don't see things the way we do, if they live their lives differently, if they still want to use drugs and alcohol, we can allow that. We don't feel so threatened by that. We don't feel that we need to push them away. And so, with the development of the mind in meditation, we actually can reach out much more to people. It doesn't close us off to others. But through the course of our practice, we may decide that that kind of lifestyle is no longer for us. It may be a natural falling away. Those relationships no longer feed our heart. Hanging around with people who are doing drugs or living another kind of lifestyle to the one which we find is most helpful for us may mean that we voluntarily, if you like, just choose no longer to associate with those friends. Doesn't mean that we shut them out of our heart, but we no longer feel the same kind of connection to them as we did. But this takes courage. It takes courage to be willing to explore what the spiritual life has to offer. And one of the other things to understand about the spiritual path and meditation is that meditation cannot be developed in isolation from how we live the rest of our life. If we're going to really make progress and get the fruits of our meditation practice, then we need to support the meditation practice through living a good life, living a life of integrity, keeping the precepts, not harming, not intentionally harming others, not intentionally harming ourselves, not taking what is not given, and starting to look at ways of sharing what we have with those who need it. Honouring our commitments in our relationships, particularly in our close emotional relationships, partnerships, not committing adultery. Developing honest speech, being true to our word, being someone who can be trusted, and not using drugs and alcohol as an easy way of finding some kind of peace or enjoyment in life. Not only keeping precepts, but also actively cultivating goodness, generosity, loving kindness, care for others, and also care for ourselves. These are all indispensable ingredients in the spiritual life. If we haven't been living our life with integrity, or if we've been trying to compartmentalise our life, have a spiritual life that we do on certain days or with certain people, or when we're in the mood, and doing all sorts of other things at other times, then we'll find that our spiritual life won't grow. Our meditation practice won't grow. So if we are dissatisfied with the way our mind is going, the way our life is going, and we want to make changes, we need to be prepared to look at all the aspects of our life. And then, little by little, bring into our life the things which will support our spiritual growth. And it struck me as I was speaking with someone earlier today that it does take courage to do this. And if we can acknowledge that and honour that, understanding that it's not easy, understanding that it is going to be scary sometimes, understanding that we aren't always going to be up to it, but that's okay. Forgiving ourselves when we don't live up to our expectations, but having the courage to reaffirm the direction that we want to take in our life. This is how our spiritual life grows. Once we have started to cultivate the spiritual path, we have to be careful of falling into the trap of becoming complacent, and particularly complacent in our meditation. After we've come over the early difficulties of the restless mind and the aching body, and not really seeing the point of the practice or of our meditation, after we've gotten through those difficulties and things have started to come together, and we feel that we're getting somewhere with our meditation, and when we sit down the mind becomes peaceful, or at least bearable, then we can very easily fall into the trap of just doing the meditation without really paying attention to the meditation. This complacency often doesn't reveal itself in the fact that we don't do the practice, but the way that we do the practice is very superficial. It's pleasant enough to just hang out on the cushion, and we can say that we've done our meditation for the day, but have we really paid attention while we were doing our meditation? Or has it become like a ritual? I did my half hour, I did my 20 minutes, I sat today. But what happened while we sat? Like any other activity that we do regularly, it can become a routine which we do on automatic pilot. We're not really paying attention. It occurred to me this week while I was cleaning the toilet that this was analogous to doing meditation, because when I was cleaning the toilet, I noticed that there was some dirt on the rim where the buttons are. You push the buttons to make the water flow. And cleaning the toilet in the monastery is one of those jobs that we do every day. Like sitting in meditation, we do that every day in the monastery too. But here I was cleaning the toilet when suddenly, there's some ingrained dirt on that edge there. And obviously that dirt had been there for some time. And yet someone, maybe me, had been cleaning that toilet every day. How come that wasn't cleaned? And I reflected, that's right, this cleaning the toilet bit, doing it with half our attention on cleaning the toilet and half our attention on something else. And the something else might be what we have to do next. Or the something else might be, I'll get this over as quickly as I can. I don't like cleaning the toilet. Or maybe, I cleaned the toilet yesterday, why have I got to do it again today? Irritation. When I finish cleaning the toilet, I can do something that I really enjoy. Desire, reaching out for the next experience. Trying to get finished with the job, rather than cleaning the toilet to clean the toilet. That's the purpose of cleaning the toilet, to clean it. And yet, here we are, doing our routine over the top, down the side, in the bowl, under the seat, squish a bit in there, finished. Did we really see the dirt that was there? Did the thoughts about the past and the future mean that we cleaned the toilet and did something else mentally? The emotions with which we cleaned the toilet, like or dislike, did that mean that we were blind to what needed to be done? How our perception of what needed to be done is affected by the emotions present in the mind, or affected by the thoughts present in the mind. Why was it that on that particular day my perception was able to see the dirt that had been there? Not just on that day, but before, the dirt which I'd been blind to. If we clean the toilet just to get the job done, then we often don't see what needs to be seen. We have to be cleaning the toilet to clean the toilet. And meditation practice has to be done in the same way. We have to understand that the purpose of the meditation is to purify the mind. The purpose of the meditation is to see what's in the mind and to clean out the dirt so that the brightness can shine through. Now, if we come to our meditation practice without understanding the purpose, then we might think that there's something wrong with the meditation when peacefulness doesn't just arise. We mightn't even notice that thinking is present. We mightn't even notice that worry is present. We mightn't even notice that sadness is present because we're sitting there half-heartedly. We're not really taking a close look at what is in the mind when we start to meditate. Even if we are unable to focus continuously on the breath, when we sit down to meditate, we have to start to pay attention to what is present in the mind that makes it impossible for us to focus on the breath. If we are only approaching our meditation half-heartedly, then we very often sit down and it's not peaceful, so we go off into dreamland. We go somewhere where it is peaceful. We can't achieve a pleasant state through focusing on the meditation object, but we can easily achieve a pleasant state by having a nice daydream, or thinking about a movie that we saw, or making up a movie in our mind. If we're just looking for pleasant mind states, a pleasant experience, then we find alternative means if it's not arising in the meditation itself. We might feel disappointed because when we start to look into the mind and peacefulness isn't present, it's not what we expected, it's not what we wanted, and so we turn away from looking closely at what's there. We mightn't recognize that the emotion that we are feeling, the emotion that's colouring the mind, has been triggered by something that we've experienced during the day, something that happened to us, something that someone said. If we don't pay attention, if we don't identify what's present in the mind, then we never get the opportunity to see cause and effect, to identify the triggers that produce our mind states, that produce our emotional reactions. Part of the goal of the meditation is to be able to witness the changing mental states, to be able to witness them as they're present, as they're arising, and as they're passing away. If we understand that this is part of the purpose of meditation, then instead of having a knee-jerk reaction, I don't like this, or this isn't peaceful, and going off somewhere else, the thing which is preventing peacefulness, preventing concentration, that becomes the object of our attention. This is what helps us to develop mindfulness, to strengthen that quality of the mind which observes with detachment what is going on in the mind. the more that we strengthen that ability to observe, to witness what is going on in the mind, the more peacefulness comes into the mind. Because instead of feeding those emotions, getting lost in the thoughts, even if just for a mind moment, we are robbing them of their energy by observing them. Once we do this, we are able to take that witnessing ability from our meditation practice into our daily life. To take that stability of mind which we develop in meditation practice into our daily interactions, so that we know what's going on in the mind, and we know what is in the mind before we speak and before we act. We can observe what happens in the mind after we speak and after we act, but only if we have developed this witnessing quality in the mind. Sometimes we think that our meditation is no good because we can't sit in bliss, because we can't focus on the meditation object to the point where peacefulness arises. But if we understand that the purpose of the meditation is to get to know the mind, then even if the mind isn't peaceful, and we know that, that is the practice. In order to see deeper levels of the mind, we do need a foundation of peacefulness. We do need to develop the mind in tranquility meditation. Otherwise, what we do observe is always the surface of the mind. We never see what's behind the superficial thinking, the knee-jerk reactions. So, developing calm in the mind, clarity in the mind, is essential to go deeper. But if we don't do the work of paying attention wholeheartedly every time we sit down to meditate, we will never get to the peace and calm that takes us into those deeper levels of knowing. In meditation, in the approach to meditation, there are two ways of coming into closer contact with our experience and using the mind that develops in meditation to enable us to see things differently from how we usually see them, to see outside our conditioning. One of those approaches is where we dig in and dissect our experience into smaller and smaller segments, like using a microscope to see greater detail of smaller and smaller pieces of what we call me. So this is the kind of meditation that we develop when we start to see a mental state we identify it, we recognize what triggered it, we observe how it arises, how it changes over time as we're observing it. We recognize its passing away, and we observe what happens after it passes away. What's triggered next? What's the next thought or the next emotion? And where does that come from? What produces that? And we keep on dissecting, seeing smaller and smaller segments of our experience in more and more detail, until we finally break through the sense of there's one solid, fixed me somewhere inside here who's making all this happen, who's pulling all the strings. We start to see multiple influences affecting us and how changeable our reactions are to what we experience. And we start to see how our reactions affect those around us, produce the next moment of our experience. But we start to be able to see all of those segments in much clearer detail, to break down this perception of solidity, of continuity in who I am and how I react. That's one approach in meditation, or one of the ways in which the meditative mind approaches the development of insight, the development of seeing things differently from how it usually sees things. The other approach, or the other way in which the mind develops, is when we pursue the development of tranquility practice, staying focused on one object continuously, moment after moment after moment. At first, the mind sharpens its attention on that object, and we see that object in much clearer detail. So when we're seeing the breath, as we develop our concentration on the breath, all the different features of the breath become more obvious. The in-breath distinct from the out-breath, the changing in-breath, the changing out-breath. We get to the point where we can even feel the molecules of the breath rather than the breath as a solid thing. We stay with the meditation object to a point where the peaceful feeling arises, and as we experience the breath at that time, the breath is accompanied by or is embedded in a peaceful feeling. And eventually that peaceful feeling, the brightness in the mind itself, becomes the focus for our attention. As we develop this kind of practice, not just once but many, many times, the mind expands beyond its normal boundaries. And perhaps you've experienced this when you practice perhaps loving kindness meditation. Even with the breath this happens, that there comes a time when it feels like the mind or the heart has expanded beyond its normal limitations. It's particularly obvious with loving kindness meditation when there's often a feeling that the heart has opened to include the whole world, to include not just the people that we're close to, but to include people that we don't even know. Sometimes not just to include people, but to include all living creatures. There's a sense in which the heart opens to the whole world. And there's the same kind of experience that happens with the mind. That the mind opens to, if you like, a bird's eye view of reality. The boundaries of self, the boundaries of who I am, the boundaries that limit who I am, or limit how I react, or limit what I can do, limit what I can bear. Those boundaries disappear. And we have this sense of expansiveness, of being not just bigger than the small me, but even that sense of me as being bound disappears. And this is not enlightenment. This is just an experience in meditation, which, if repeated, if practiced, helps us to break down our view of our place in the world, break down our view of where we stand in relation to other people, to break down our view of where we fit in to the whole scheme of things. This is coming to the same understanding or insight into self and non-self, what there really is at the core of this mind and body, instead of approaching it by dissecting into smaller and smaller segments, what we take to be me, what we take to be I, who I am, we expand beyond the boundaries that we've taken to be who we are. We've taken to be reality. The consequence of these kinds of experiences is that we feel differently about our place in the world. We feel differently about our connections with the people that we share this world with. It leads to an openness. It leads to a recognition of the common ground that we share as human beings, as living beings in this universe. As we open to this kind of understanding, we start to live our lives with a much greater sense of inner refuge, of inner security. In one way, we feel more connected to everything else and to everyone else. Compassion, the wish for everyone to be free of suffering, grows in the heart. There's more of a connection, but at the same time there's more of a feeling of inner safety. There's more of a feeling of self-sufficiency, which seems a contradiction, but in fact which allows us to engage with much less fear with the world. This kind of development is available for everyone who practices, who cultivates the path. We are extremely fortunate that the Dharma, the Buddha's teaching, gives us the whole package of how we can make this kind of movement in the mind, how we can expand the mind, develop this kind of wisdom and inner peace. But the meditation, as I've said, can't be practiced in isolation from how we live the rest of our life. Without a foundation of morality and virtue, without the active cultivation of goodness in our life, the meditation practice won't bear fruit. As we cultivate the path, as we live a life of virtue, of integrity, then there will be immediate benefits to ourselves and to everyone else. And as we use that virtue to support our meditation practice, the fruit of meditation practice is greater love, greater peace, greater harmony in our own mind and in our relationships with others. Even if we haven't experienced that for ourselves so far, I would encourage everyone here to take heart that it is possible. And particularly if you're being discouraged through what your practice has been so far, or you're feeling discouraged because you're worried that it's going to cut you off from other people, I would certainly want to show you through this talk that the very opposite will happen. There will be much more connection, much more of an open, warm heart towards others, and that the depth of the inner peace that one can find through this path is beyond anything that can be realized or experienced through artificial means. We all have this capacity within our own mind, and we don't have to use things outside ourselves. We don't have to use drugs and alcohol, but we do have to put in the effort and do the work if we want to uncover the beauty within the mind. So may this teaching encourage you all to continue with your practice, and may the merit of this teaching help us all to attain Nibbana. If anyone has any questions or comments, I'd be happy to try to answer or encourage you. Yes, that's a very standard kind of question and comment about meditation. That is, sometimes it seems like you're going backwards. There can be times when you have peaceful states arising, and then other times when you seem to be just thinking and there's no peacefulness, and you think, well, maybe I should go and do something like paint a room or something, to do something useful. First of all, we have to, I think, get rid of the idea that a good meditation is only good when it's peaceful. meditation is like anything else. It's a conditioned experience. And what is happening in our life, what's happening whether we're well or whether we're sick, whether we've had a heavy day or a bad day or a good day, all of those things will affect the mind. And so we can't expect that the meditation will be the same every time we sit, because our life is constantly throwing up new conditions or different conditions, and the meditation will be affected by that. But it's a very common experience that when we practice regularly and we are little by little clearing out the debris in the mind, I like to refer to it, that the mind is becoming stronger and clearer in ways which we don't often notice, because it's not a big difference. It's not something like those wonderful peaceful states that arise. It's just a very gradual brightening of the mind, a very gradual strengthening of the mind. And when the mind is developing in that way, what happens often is that the mind will begin to throw up memories from a deeper level, thoughts from a deeper level of our experience, of our conditioning, of our karmic inheritance. And the mind only throws those things up, or is only open to those things, because we've been cleaning up the mind regularly. We've been doing the daily work, if you like. And because that superficial level of experience is being dealt with on a daily basis, what we've been carrying at a deeper level in the mind comes to the surface. And we can think something's gone wrong because where's my peace gone? But it's in fact a sign of progress, that the mind is now able to deal with those deeper levels, that those deeper levels are now accessible to our conscious awareness. Meditation is about bringing our experience into our conscious awareness, to be able to be fully present with what we are experiencing, rather than to be there half-heartedly or blindly. And so when the mind has been cleaned up through regular practice, then those long-held memories, those old sankharas, will very often present themselves. And it's not that we've gone backwards, it's in fact a sign of the strength of the mind, that it can now hold those things when they come into our mind. And the practice at that time is to turn towards them and see what's there, to put the light of our awareness on them, rather than to push them away and think that these shouldn't be here. People often get discouraged thinking that something's gone wrong, when in fact their meditation is developing and allowing them to do a much deeper level of cleaning in the mind than they were able to do when they were just occupied continually with what happened today at work, or what I've got to do tomorrow at work, or what's for dinner. Right. Practical advice for doing our jobs mindfully. I think it's very important to see every job as equal. Every part of our day is equal. It's not that some parts are more important than others, because the mind that we take to what is seemingly unimportant will condition the mind moment after that and after that. So if we are barely paying attention to what we consider to be unimportant, then whatever is going on and is only dimly seen, that will condition the next moment. So enlightenment can happen while cleaning toilets. Enlightenment can happen while we're putting on our slippers. Enlightenment can happen while we're talking to the person that's closest to us in our life. But we have to be paying attention, and we have to have cultivated mind moment after mind moment of being fully present. That's being fully present is the key to doing jobs thoroughly, to doing them properly the first time, and to doing them in the least time necessary to do them. And it's cultivating that ability to be fully present that makes it possible for us in our meditation to go beyond a superficial seeing of our experience, to go beyond what we've been conditioned to see. So, for example, the story about cleaning the toilet had an impact because I was only perceiving that dirt on that particular occasion, but the dirt had been there for a while. Now, why hadn't I seen it on other occasions? Because I didn't want to see it. And it wasn't that I consciously didn't want to see it, but I had allowed other things to preoccupy the mind so that I couldn't see it. So this is where we understand at a deeper level non-self. We assume that when I want to see it, I'll be able to choose to see it. When I want to really do something mindfully or with my full attention, I'll be able to do that just through willpower. But if we haven't cultivated that capacity in the mind again and again and again, and particularly if we've cultivated the opposite capacity, that is, we've cultivated half-hearted attention, or we've cultivated doing things always with resistance, then that's what will be stronger. And even if for one mind moment we have the willpower to say, I've really got to get this job done, the next mind moment the mind will be off doing what it normally does. And that's where we have the ability, if we are in the moment and see the mind going off, at that point there can be the insight into non-self. This mind is operating according to causes and conditions, not according to what I want it to do. So staying awake in that moment, in the middle of doing something very mundane, can, if we've been feeding the mind Dharma and if we've been paying attention, in that moment we can see non-self very clearly. So valuing everything equally is one of the key points, key strategies for developing mindfulness to that degree. Yes? Yes, yes.
Seems to be related also to love and kindness.
Right.
And sometimes it can get a bit out of hand.
The question is about the bittersweetness that comes when you see something, maybe a long-held sadness or some kind of defilement in the mind, some ingrained habit pattern that you suddenly see for the first time, and there's the sort of punch, if you like, of seeing something that you don't like. But there's also the joy of recognising that you've seen something that you need to see in order to wake up. Is that basically, yeah?
Yeah, there seems to be a lot of ecstasy with it as well.
Yeah, the ecstasy. So that ecstasy is associated with insight, associated with waking up. Even if we see something we don't like, the fact that we're seeing it is already freeing us from that. And there was another example of this kind of thing just in the last few days at the monastery. Some people came to the monastery who their child had just died, and they were very sad, obviously. They were grieving. And someone made the comment afterwards that for them it was the first time that they had been able to actually feel the pain of another person. And we talked about how it was that they had come to that point, that they'd developed to the point of being open to feeling someone else's pain. And I won't go into the whole details, but it's a result of practice of being able to open up and to really empathise with someone else. And although they felt the pain of the other person, there was a joy associated with that, in recognising that they'd been able to let down their own barriers, their own self-cherishing. They'd been able to think of the other person as themselves. So even though they felt the pain of those grieving parents, at the same time there was this joy of recognising that they'd grown through being able to do that. And this is very often what we experience. We experience this mixture of seeing something or opening to something, which in itself can be painful, but then there's the joy that comes with recognising that this is for our growth towards complete freedom from suffering. So it's good to acknowledge that there are these two aspects to it, but to continually remind ourselves of the joy that comes through insight, to continually remind ourselves of the fruit of the practice. Because the habit of the mind to forget, to follow its old patterns again, or to only see the negative rather than to see the positive. Those patterns have to be challenged again and again and again. So it's very important to bring up again that feeling of liberation that comes when we see something or experience something for the first time. Right. So the question is, when we feel the suffering of others, how can we then control our capacity to our desire to help beyond our capacity? This is where wisdom comes in, where when compassion is supported and grows out of wisdom, then first of all there's a recognition that there is a limit to what we can do, but that doesn't stop us from doing anything. We do what we can. And doing what we can, we do that wholeheartedly, but understanding the limitations of what we can do. And then also, as we develop a deeper understanding of cause and effect, and of the fact that this isn't the only life that we have, that we are all playing out karmic inheritances that we've brought with us, that in this life itself we have opportunities for change which we may not take. When we start to see a bigger context for the suffering that we're confronting, then that also helps us to limit or be reconciled with the limitations of what we can do to relieve the suffering of others. So through wisdom particularly, we learn to be at peace, even though we feel the suffering. Thank you for that. That was a comment about helping when there's no peace in the meditation, and that's something that disturbs the mind. Then to concentrate on loving kindness meditation, and the friend was saying he did that. Sorry? For 200 nights. So thank you for saying that, because it's very important for all of us to understand that if you want to make changes in the mind, it takes practice day after day after day, but the changes will come. But none of these things are miracles. They don't work overnight unless you've got a very strong karmic tendency towards miraculous experiences overnight, then it's not likely to happen. So it means effort and repetition day after day. But 200 meditations on loving kindness and it works wonders. Well, if you think about it in terms of lifetimes, or even this lifetime, how many times we've done 200 other things that haven't brought us happiness. It makes sense. There are 365 days in a year. We do 200 loving kindness meditations. From now, in 1 year's time, we're going to be happier people. It's great. Before Christmas, next year. Anyway, it's after 9 o'clock now, so thank you for listening and for your comments and questions, and I think now it's time to listen to some announcements.